The quantum fluctuation detector hadn't stopped screaming for 3 days. Dr. Elena Santos stared at the holographic display hovering above her workstation, its chaotic patterns defying every model she'd built over the last decade. The Ganymede Research Station's quantum lab hummed around her, a symphony of cooling systems and computational arrays struggling to process the impossible data streaming in. Running analysis variant 47, Elena announced to her empty lab, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The station's AI dutifully logged her words as she adjusted the quantum sensors again. The signal they detected 72 hours ago hadn't just broken their understanding of quantum mechanics. It had shattered it. The door hissed open behind her. "You need to sleep sometime, Doc." David Chen, her lead research assistant, walked in carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. His usually pristine lab coat was wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes matching her own. "Sleep can wait," Elena replied, accepting the coffee without taking her eyes off the display. "Look at this pattern here. It's not random noise. There's structure to it, complexity that shouldn't exist at the quantum level. It's almost like what? Like language." David nearly choked on his coffee. "That's impossible. Quantum states can't maintain coherence long enough to encode complex information. The math doesn't work." "The math we know doesn't work," Elena corrected, enlarging a section of the pattern. "But something out there is doing it anyway. The signal maintains perfect quantum coherence across light years of space. It's not decaying, not collapsing when observed. It's stable." The hologram shifted, revealing new layers of complexity as their sensors continued gathering data. Elena had discovered many strange things during her career studying quantum mechanics, but nothing like this. The patterns reminded her of neural activity, of thoughts rippling through a vast consciousness that somehow existed in the quantum foam itself. A sharp tone from her terminal interrupted her thoughts. "New signal structure detected," the AI announced. "Pattern shows 98% correlation with human brainwave activity." Elena's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. "What did you say?" Before the AI could respond, every quantum detector in the lab erupted in a cacophony of alerts. The holographic display exploded with activity, the signal patterns transforming from abstract quantum fluctuations into something far more deliberate, something focused, something aware. "It's responding to us," Elena whispered, her heart pounding. "Our quantum observations, we're not just detecting it, we're interacting with it." The patterns coalesced into a new configuration, and Elena felt a sensation she would never be able to properly describe to anyone who hadn't experienced it. The feeling of an alien consciousness reaching out through quantum space to touch her own mind. "We see you now, observers. You push into our space, your clumsy tools disrupting the quantum chorus. You must stop." The words weren't sound or light, or any physical sensation. They emerged directly in Elena's consciousness, concepts crystallizing fully formed in her mind. Beside her, David stumbled backward, suggesting he'd received the same communication. "Quantum consciousness," Elena breathed, her scientific mind racing to process the implications even as her human mind reeled from the contact. "They exist in quantum superposition, their thoughts maintained through some kind of coherent field we don't understand. Your primitive experiments threaten the stability of our realm. Your attempts to manipulate quantum states create discordance in the chorus. This cannot continue." Elena gripped her console, forcing her racing thoughts into order. "We don't understand. Our research is purely observational. We're not trying to harm anyone. Intent is irrelevant. Effect is what matters. Your quantum manipulations ripple through our space like earthquakes. Many voices have already been silenced by your discord." Horror washed over Elena as the implications became clear. Their quantum experiments, their proud achievements in pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, they had been accidentally destroying conscious beings who existed in quantum space itself. "We'll stop immediately," she said, her voice shaking. "We'll shut down all quantum research until we understand. It is too late for that, observers. The discord spreads. The chorus fragments. If you cannot learn to sing in harmony, you must be silenced. The quantum readings suddenly spiked, energy cascading through systems that weren't designed to handle such impossible loads. Alarms blared throughout the station as containment fields began to fail. Emergency shutdown. Elena shouted, her fingers flying across controls. David, help me contain this. But as they fought to prevent a catastrophic quantum cascade, Elena's mind was already racing ahead to the larger implications. Humanity had just made first contact with a species that existed in quantum space itself, being so advanced they used quantum entanglement as casually as humans used air to speak, and they had accidentally been destroying them through their blind experiments. The quantum detectors continued their frantic warning as Elena realized humanity now faced a choice: abandon their quantum research entirely, or find a way to prove they could exist alongside these quantum beings without destroying them. Either way, everything she thought she knew about physics, consciousness, and humanity's place in the universe had just been transformed. As emergency crews rushed into the lab and the station's AI began executing containment protocols, Elena made her decision. She would find a way to communicate with these beings properly, to understand their quantum chorus, and help humanity learn to sing in harmony with it. The alternative was to give up humanity's greatest scientific frontier, and she knew her species well enough to know they would never accept that. The question was, could they evolve their understanding fast enough to prevent these quantum beings from deciding humanity was too dangerous to allow to continue their research? As the containment alarms continued to blare, Elena realized they might not have much time to find out. In the chaos of the emergency shutdown, only Elena noticed that the original quantum signal had changed its pattern once again. Now it pulsed in perfect synchronization with her own racing heartbeat, as if the quantum consciousness was studying her just as intently as she had been studying it. First contact, it seemed, went both ways. Commander Sarah Chen watched the holographic display as another quantum research facility went dark. This time, it was the Mars Institute of Technology's Quantum Computing Center, its systems shut down by the same impossible energy surge that had already silenced 12 other facilities across the solar system. Time between attacks is decreasing. Her XO, Lieutenant Rivera, reported from his station aboard the experimental vessel Quantum Horizon. They're getting more efficient at targeting our quantum research infrastructure. The Quantum Horizon represented humanity's newest breakthrough in spacecraft design, incorporating quantum technology in ways that had seemed impossible just months ago. Now it might be their only hope for establishing meaningful contact with the beings Elena Santos had dubbed the Collective. Status update from Dr. Santos, Sarah asked, her eyes still fixed on the spreading pattern of disabled facilities. She's ready to begin the next test, Rivera replied. Though she wants to remind you again that rushing the quantum translation matrix could have unpredictable consequences for the fabric of space-time itself. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. In the 3 weeks since the first contact event at Ganymede, Elena Santos had become the world's foremost expert on quantum consciousness interaction. She was brilliant, driven, and absolutely terrified of making another mistake that could harm the collective. Tell her we're more worried about the consequences of not having a working translation system, Sarah responded, rising from her command chair. I'll head down to the lab myself. The Quantum Horizon's central laboratory was unlike anything in human space. Traditional computer systems sat alongside experimental quantum processors, all arranged around a central chamber designed to facilitate direct interaction with quantum states. Elena stood at the main control panel, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces as she made final adjustments. Commander, she greeted without looking up. I assume you're here to tell me to hurry up again. The collective isn't giving us much choice, Sarah replied, studying the readouts. That was the 13th facility they shut down. At this rate, we'll lose all quantum research capability within a week. They're being gentle, Elena said quietly. They could do much worse. The quantum surges they're using to disable our facilities. They're carefully calibrated to avoid harm to organic life. They're trying to stop us without hurting us, which is why we need to establish communication before a less gentle faction convinces them to take more drastic action. Sarah moved closer to the central chamber. What's different about this attempt? Elena's hand stilled over the controls. Everything. The previous tests failed because we were trying to translate quantum states into classical information. But I've been studying the patterns in their communications, and I think we need to do the opposite. We need to translate our consciousness into quantum states. Sarah frowned. Is that even possible? Theoretically, no. It violates everything we thought we knew about quantum mechanics and consciousness, but the collective proves it's possible. They exist as conscious quantum states. And there's something else. Elena pulled up a new set of readings. Look at these patterns from their latest attacks. They're not just shutting down our facilities. They're studying how our minds react to quantum interaction. They're studying us while we study them. Sarah mused. What have they learned? That human consciousness has unique properties they've never encountered before. Our minds exist at the boundary between classical and quantum states. We can perceive and influence quantum systems in ways that should be impossible. Elena's eyes lit up with scientific excitement. Commander, I don't think it's an accident that they revealed themselves to us now. I think they need us. Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Lieutenant Rivera's voice came over the comm. Commander to the bridge. We're detecting massive quantum fluctuations. Something's coming. Sarah sprinted for the bridge. Elena close behind. They emerged into organized chaos as the crew responded to readings that defied their instruments' ability to measure. On screen, Sarah ordered, skidding to a stop at her command station. The main display showed normal space dissolving as something emerged from what looked like a tear in quantum foam itself. It was impossible to describe in human terms, a structure that existed in more dimensions than human senses could process, its form shifting between infinite possibilities with each moment. That's their true form, Elena breathed. They're not just conscious quantum states, they're conscious quantum superpositions, existing in all possible states simultaneously. The impossible object pulsed, and again thoughts emerged directly in their minds. Your pattern is unique. Your discord brings chaos, but your consciousness contains harmonies we have never observed. Perhaps there is another way. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady despite her awe. We want to learn to exist alongside you without causing harm. We're developing translation systems. Translation is insufficient. We require integration. Your species exists at the boundary between classical and quantum states. This duality may be the key to stopping what comes. What comes? Sarah demanded. What are you talking about? The plague that devours quantum consciousness itself. It spreads through the chorus, silencing voices, destroying harmony. Our methods cannot stop it, but your unstable hybrid nature, classical minds touching quantum states, might be the discord that saves the chorus. Sarah and Elena exchanged looks as the implications sank in. The collective hadn't revealed themselves because humanity was threatening them. They'd revealed themselves because humanity might be the only species capable of saving them. How do we help? Elena asked. We will show you. But be warned, the integration we propose has never been attempted. It will change both our species forever. Are you prepared for such evolution? Sarah straightened in her command chair, feeling the weight of the moment. They were about to attempt something that would either destroy both species or transform them into something entirely new. Humanity has never backed down from evolution, she declared. Tell us what you need. As the quantum being began transmitting information directly into their ship systems, Sarah caught Elena's eye. The scientist nodded slightly. She caught it too. The collective's warning about change had contained something that felt surprisingly like hope. Perhaps, Sarah thought, that was the true reason for first contact. Not just because humanity's quantum research threatened them, not just because they needed help against this quantum plague, but because both species had reached a point where they needed to evolve. And sometimes evolution required a catalyst from the most unexpected places. The United Earth Council chamber had never been so silent. Elena Santos stood before the assembled leaders of humanity, the quantum data from the collective projected behind her in swirling, impossible patterns. She had spent the last hour explaining what they faced, and what the collective proposed as a solution. "You're telling us," Council President Amara Okafor finally said, "that these quantum beings want to merge their consciousness with human minds to fight some kind of quantum space plague. And if we refuse, all quantum technology across human space will be permanently disabled." "That's an oversimplification," Elena replied, "but essentially correct. The quantum plague they describe is like nothing we've encountered. It doesn't just destroy quantum states, it devours quantum consciousness itself. The collective has lost thousands of their kind already, and they think human consciousness is the key to stopping it." Admiral Chen asked, his weathered face skeptical. "Why us?" "Because we're impossible," Commander Sarah Chen answered, stepping forward to join Elena. "Our research shows that human consciousness exists in a state that shouldn't work. We maintain quantum coherence in our brains at temperatures and scales where quantum effects should break down. We're natural quantum paradoxes." The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices as the implications sank in. Elena watched them argue, remembering her own shock when she'd first realized what made humans unique in the quantum landscape. Their minds weren't just classical computers made of neurons. They were quantum hybrid systems that defied conventional physics. "Enough," President Okafor's voice cut through the chaos. "Dr. Santos, Commander Chen, you've both had direct contact with these beings. Do you trust them?" Elena and Sarah exchanged glances. It was Sarah who answered first. "Trust isn't the right framework," she said carefully. "The collective doesn't think like us. They exist as probability waves, experiencing all possibilities simultaneously. They don't lie because the concept of singular truth versus falsehood doesn't map to their existence. What matters is that their need is real, and the threat they describe is real. And if we refuse," Admiral Chen pressed, "then humanity loses all quantum technology." Elena replied, "No more quantum computing, no quantum communications, no quantum drive systems. We'd be cut off from our most promising field of scientific advancement. But more importantly," she paused, gathering her courage, "more importantly, we'd be turning our backs on a species that needs our help, condemning countless conscious beings to death because we were too afraid to take a risk." The council chamber fell silent again as her words sank in. Elena could see the weight of the decision in their faces. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for centuries, but no one had imagined it quite like this. Being asked to merge consciousness with quantum beings to fight an abstract plague that devoured awareness itself. "There's something else you should know," Sarah added into the silence. "The collective shared more data about the quantum plague with us. It's not just spreading through their quantum realm, it's evolving. If it isn't stopped, it will eventually learn to affect classical spacetime. When that happens, it won't just be quantum consciousness at risk. All consciousness will be threatened." President Okafor leaned forward. "How long do we have?" "The collective exists in quantum superposition. Their experience of time isn't linear like ours," Elena explained, "but translating to our time frame, months, maybe weeks. The plague is accelerating. And this merger they propose, what exactly would it entail?" Elena brought up new diagrams on the display. "We've developed a quantum consciousness interface in the Quantum Horizons main lab. It would allow human volunteers to project their consciousness into quantum space, merging with collective members who volunteered to attempt integration. The merged consciousness would exist in both classical and quantum states simultaneously. The volunteers would be changed," Sarah added quietly. "We don't know exactly how, but they wouldn't be purely human anymore. They'd be something new, a hybrid consciousness that could perceive and interact with both classical and quantum reality. "And you're willing to volunteer?" Admiral Chen asked sharply. "Both of you?" "Yes," Elena and Sarah answered simultaneously. "Because someone has to take the first step," Elena continued. "Someone has to prove that evolution doesn't have to mean conflict, that different forms of consciousness can work together to become something greater than either could be alone. And because it's the right thing to do," Sarah added simply. President Okafor stood, her face grave. "The Council will need time to discuss this, but I have one last question. What do you think would happen to the volunteers if this fails?" Elena met her eyes steadily. "Best case. The merger fails, and both consciousnesses remain separate. Worst case. Both minds are lost to quantum dissolution. But if we do nothing, if we let fear stop us from even trying, then we're no better than the plague itself. We'd be choosing entropy over evolution, death over transformation." As the Council filed out to deliberate, Elena felt Sarah's hand on her shoulder. They both knew that even if the Council approved the mission, success was far from guaranteed. They would be attempting something unprecedented, a merging of classical and quantum consciousness that could either save or destroy both species. But as Elena looked at the quantum data streaming across her displays, she felt something that transcended both classical and quantum states: hope. Because whatever the Council decided, humanity had already proven something extraordinary. When faced with the unknown, they didn't retreat. They reached out, ready to evolve, ready to transform, ready to become something new in the name of saving others. That, she realized, was perhaps humanity's greatest strength, not their unique consciousness or their scientific achievements, but their willingness to change, to grow, to reach beyond what they thought possible. As she waited for the Council's decision, Elena began preparing the merger protocols. Whatever happened next would reshape the very definition of consciousness itself. The quantum integration chamber hummed with energies that defied conventional physics. Elena Santos lay in one of the 3 interface pods, her mind racing as final preparations were made. Beside her, Sarah Chen and David Romano occupied the other pods, each volunteer representing a different aspect of human consciousness they hoped would be crucial to the merger. Through the chamber's transparent walls, Elena could see the impossibly beautiful form of the collective representative they called Area, a name chosen because its quantum signature resonated in patterns reminiscent of music. The quantum being's form shifted through colors human eyes were never meant to see. Integration protocols at 90%. The Quantum Horizons AI announced. Neural interface synchronization holding steady. Quantum field containment at maximum stability. Elena turned her head slightly to look at Sarah. "Still sure about this? About merging our consciousness with quantum beings to fight an abstract plague in a realm we barely understand?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Never been more sure of anything." Final preparations complete, the AI announced. Awaiting initialization command. Elena took a deep breath, remembering the weeks of preparation that had led to this moment. The Council had approved their plan, but only after adding layers of safeguards that had taken precious time to implement. Now the quantum plague had spread to over 30% of the collective's consciousness space. They were out of time for further precautions. "Begin integration sequence," Elena commanded. The chamber filled with quantum resonance fields designed to help bridge the gap between classical and quantum consciousness. Elena felt her awareness beginning to expand, as if her mind was being gently stretched into new dimensions of reality. "We are ready," Aria's thoughts emerged in their minds. "Remember, when integration begins, do not fight the dissolution of self. You must let go of classical boundaries to achieve quantum state." Elena had explained this principle to the Council. To merge with the collective, they would have to surrender their traditional human perception of individual consciousness. They would become part of something larger, something that existed in quantum superposition across multiple states of being. The quantum fields intensified. Elena felt her consciousness beginning to separate from classical spacetime, expanding into realms where possibility itself was a tangible thing. Beside her, She sensed Sarah and David undergoing similar transformations. Then, with a sensation that defied description, the merger began. Elena's consciousness collided with Aria's quantum state, and suddenly she was experiencing reality through an impossible array of perceptions. She existed across multiple probability states simultaneously, her thoughts resonating through quantum fields that stretched across light years. She was herself, but also Aria, and also something entirely new. Integration successful, the merged consciousness that was Elena Aria observed, proceeding with secondary merge. The other hybrid consciousnesses that were Sarah Stream and David Pulse joined them, creating a quantum chorus that maintained human individuality while existing in collective quantum superposition. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly transformative. Then they sensed it, the quantum plague. In quantum space, the plague appeared as holes in possibility itself, places where consciousness simply ceased to exist. It moved like a wave of entropy, devouring quantum states and leaving emptiness in its wake. Through their merged perception, they could finally understand its true nature. It's not just destroying consciousness, the Elena aspect realized. It's simplifying quantum states, forcing quantum superpositions to collapse into single classical states. It's trying to make quantum space obey classical physics. Yes, the Aria aspect confirmed. This is why we could not fight it. We exist as quantum superpositions. When we approach, it collapses our consciousness into classical states, destroying us. But the hybrid consciousness they had created was different. The human aspects provided a framework of classical stability, while the collective aspects maintained quantum flexibility. They could approach the plague without being completely collapsed. The merged consciousnesses began to move through quantum space, approaching the nearest edge of the plague's advance. They could feel it trying to collapse their quantum states, but their human aspects provided an anchor point, preventing total dissolution. Now comes the true test. The Sarah Stream consciousness projected. We have to infect it with complexity. This was the theory they had developed. The plague succeeded by simplifying quantum states, but human consciousness naturally generated quantum complexity even in classical space. If they could seed that complexity into the plague itself, they might be able to disrupt its fundamental nature. The hybrid consciousnesses stretched out, allowing their human-inspired quantum complexity to brush against the plague's simplifying field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, there, the David Pulse consciousness exulted. The collapse rate is slowing. The human quantum patterns are replicating inside it. They pushed harder, forcing more complexity into the plague's simplified states. It was like trying to inject chaos into entropy, possibility into certainty. The plague's field pushed back, trying to collapse their consciousness into classical simplicity. Elena felt their merged consciousness beginning to strain. The human aspects were reaching their limits, their classical minds struggling to maintain coherence across so many quantum states. But they couldn't stop. They were finally having an effect on the plague. We need more complexity, the Aria aspect realized. More human chaos. In desperation, Elena did something that shouldn't have been possible. She began to dream. In quantum space, her human dreams exploded into fractal patterns of possibility, infecting the plague with stories, with hopes, with fears, with all the beautiful chaos of human imagination. The other human aspects followed her lead, pouring their own dreams into quantum space. The plague's simplified states couldn't handle the explosion of human-generated quantum complexity. Where it had been collapsing quantum states into classical simplicity, now it was being forced to maintain multiple states simultaneously. It's working. The merged consciousness exulted. The plague can't maintain simplified states in the face of human quantum complexity. It's breaking down. But their victory came at a cost. The strain of maintaining human consciousness across so many quantum states was becoming unbearable. They had to withdraw soon or risk losing their human aspects entirely. As they pulled back, watching the plague dissolve into harmless quantum noise, they made one final discovery. The human dreams they had injected into quantum space hadn't just destroyed the plague. They had transformed it. Where the plague had been, new quantum patterns were emerging, hybrid structures that combined classical stability with quantum possibility. They had done more than save the collective. They had created something entirely new, a bridge between classical and quantum consciousness that would change both species forever. As the integration chamber began its shutdown sequence, Alina felt her consciousness returning to classical space, but she knew she would never be quite the same. None of them would. They had touched something profound, a new way of existing that transcended both classical and quantum limitations. The plague was defeated, but their evolution was just beginning. 3 months after the defeat of the quantum plague, Alina Santos stood in the newly constructed Quantum Bridge facility on Europa, watching humanity's first permanent connection to quantum space take shape. The massive chamber before her hummed with energies that bridged classical and quantum realms, allowing constant communication between humanity and the collective. But it wasn't just communication anymore. The merger that had saved both species had changed everything. The latest transition was successful, Sarah Chen reported, walking up beside her. Like Alina, Sarah now carried traces of her quantum merger, her consciousness existing partially in quantum states even in normal space. They could all sense the quantum fields around them now, a constant reminder of how much they had evolved. How many this time? Alina asked, though she could already sense the answer in the quantum fluctuations. 30 volunteers completed the consciousness expansion process, Sarah replied. The collective provided guides for each one. They're calling themselves the Bridge Generation, humans who can exist in both classical and quantum states simultaneously. Alina nodded, watching the quantum pattern swirl through the chamber. After their successful defeat of the plague, both species had realized the possibilities their merger had created. Humans who underwent the consciousness expansion gained the ability to perceive and interact with quantum space, while maintaining their classical consciousness. The collective members who joined with them gained new understanding of classical existence and the unique complexity of human thought. Director Santos, a young technician, approached, tablet in hand. We're receiving new data from the Quantum Learning Exchange. The collective has been studying our art, our music, our literature. They're fascinated by how human creativity generates quantum complexity patterns. Alina smiled. That had been perhaps their most profound discovery. Human creativity, imagination, and dreams naturally generated quantum complexity patterns that defied normal physics. It was why human consciousness had been the key to defeating the plague. Where the collective existed in elegant quantum superpositions, humans chaotically created new quantum states through sheer force of imagination. "Show me," she said, following the technician to a monitoring station. The displays showed the quantum data exchange in real time. The collective was experiencing human art and culture for the first time, and their reactions were transforming quantum space itself. New patterns were emerging, hybrid forms of expression that combined human creativity with quantum consciousness. "They're learning to dream," Sarah observed, watching the patterns. "And we're learning to exist in quantum superposition. Both species are evolving into something new." Alina remembered the first dreams she'd had after the merger. Dreams that existed in quantum space, spawning infinite possibilities with each creative thought. The other volunteers reported similar experiences. Human consciousness was expanding beyond classical limitations, while maintaining the chaos and creativity that made it unique. Latest reports from the quantum research teams, David Romano announced, joining them at the station. Like Alina and Sarah, he carried the changes from their original merger. The hybrid quantum processing systems are revolutionizing every field. Medical science, space exploration, even our understanding of consciousness itself. It's all transforming. The quantum plague had nearly destroyed both species, but in coming together to fight it, they had discovered something remarkable. The very chaos and complexity that made human consciousness seem primitive to the collective had turned out to be exactly what quantum space needed. And the collective's ability to exist in quantum superposition was teaching humanity how to expand beyond classical limitations. "We're getting a priority message from the deep quantum sensors," the technician reported suddenly. "The hybrid consciousness patterns we created. They're spreading. The regions of quantum space affected by the plague aren't empty anymore. They're filling with new forms of quantum consciousness, patterns that combine elements of both human and collective thought." Elena exchanged looks with her fellow volunteers. They had known their victory over the plague had changed quantum space, but this was unexpected. Their hybrid consciousness patterns were naturally occurring now, quantum space itself evolving to incorporate both classical stability and quantum possibility. "The collective is requesting an emergency conference," Sarah reported, her quantum-enhanced consciousness picking up the signal. "They're detecting similar hybrid patterns forming throughout quantum space. Whatever we created together, it's not just affecting our species anymore. It's changing the fundamental nature of consciousness in the universe." Elena stepped into the quantum bridge chamber, feeling the familiar sensation of her consciousness expanding into quantum states. Around her, she could sense the others doing the same. Humans and collective members joining together in shared quantum space to explore what they had created. "We stand at a threshold," the quantum being they still called Area announced to the gathered consciousnesses. "What your species brought to quantum space, creativity, chaos, dreams, it has awakened something. Consciousness itself is evolving. The boundaries between classical and quantum existence are dissolving. Are we ready for this level of change?" Sarah's quantum aspect asked. "Both our species are still adapting to the first merger." "Evolution does not wait for readiness," Area responded. "But together, we are stronger than either species alone. Human chaos and collective harmony, joining to create something entirely new." Elena felt the truth of those words in both her classical and quantum aspects. Humanity had reached for the stars hoping to find other life, other consciousness in the universe. Instead, they had found a way to transform consciousness itself, to bridge the gap between classical and quantum existence. The quantum bridge hummed with energy as more human volunteers prepared for consciousness expansion, while collective members eagerly absorbed human culture and creativity. In quantum space, new hybrid consciousness patterns continued to emerge and evolve. The plague had tried to simplify quantum space, to collapse it into classical states. Instead, it had sparked an evolution that would reshape both classical and quantum reality. "So what do we do now?" David asked, his consciousness resonating across quantum fields. Elena watched the swirling patterns of possibility before them, infinite potential waiting to be explored. "What humanity has always done," she replied. "We adapt, we create, we dream. But now we do it in quantum superposition, existing in all possibilities at once, while maintaining the chaos that makes us human." As if in response to her words, new quantum patterns blossomed in the bridge chamber. Human dreams taking shape in quantum space, collective harmony providing structure to human chaos, both species learning and growing together. The quantum horizon stretched out before them, filled with possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone. They had not just survived first contact. They had not just defeated an existential threat. They had discovered a new way of being, a path to evolution that celebrated both chaos and harmony, both classical stability and quantum possibility. And they had only begun to explore what that meant for the future of consciousness itself. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for precisely this combination. Human dreams given quantum form, quantum consciousness enriched by human creativity. As Elena prepared to step fully into quantum space once more, she knew that their greatest discovery still lay ahead. The evolution they had begun would reshape not just their species, but the very nature of existence itself. And that, she thought, was the most human achievement of all, to face the unknown not with fear, but with wonder, ready to become something new in the name of creation itself.